All right, so that bumper is meant to introduce week 2 of 23, Psalm 23. If you're just joining us for the first time of this collection, welcome. A special welcome to those of you that are watching online. This morning there's a group of 12 young men that are watching from a home in Strawberry who have just begun, this weekend launches, a 3-year intensive apprenticeship program here centered around the scripture and helping them grow to be men that God can use in a wonderful way in our world and in the church. And so they have committed themselves to this 3 years of apprenticeship. And I would just say to them, way to go, guys. We're with you and we're for you. Yeah. Also, if you're online, I want to give you a heads up. We're going to share communion together a little later in the service, so you might want to get some juice or whatever you have, crackers, bread, whatever you've got to celebrate with that. One thing before go into what I've prepared for us today is November the 20th, we're doing a community event here that's called the Four Peak Challenge. And it's a run hike event on the 4 mountains right around our campus here. It's the 7th year we've done it, and it's one of those well experiences that we talk a lot about here. If you were with us the last series, we talked about how we want to be the kind of place where we can have the kind of conversations with friends like Jesus had with a woman in John chapter 4. And so we do these kinds of events, and registrations are way ahead of where we planned at this point, which is a really good sign. But this is the time that we need to let you know we need volunteers to help with this event, to serve our community in this way. We need about 200 volunteers. And so between now and October 15th, if you can sign up, you can go to the Four Peak Challenge website, or we have some folks with the Four Peak Challenge that are going to be out in the plaza. They would love to get your information today and sign up for things like trail hosts, campus hosts, registration folks. There's a whole bunch of roles, like there's 200 altogether to serve our community. So if you'll be part of that, you'll be blessed, and so will our community. All right, Psalm 23. I want to start with a question today. Can you imagine, or can you even believe it's possible, to live a life without any needs, ever, at any time, from anyone? To live a life without angst and anxiety and agitation of any kind, to live without fear and fluster, to live a life without lack. Can you conceive of that? Is that even possible? Could that be ours? Well, Psalm 23 speaks about that very thing, and I want to look at that a little bit in just a bit. But to catch you up with Psalm 23, this is a 6-stanza poem. We call it a psalm, but it's a poem written by a former shepherd boy who becomes the greatest king that Israel ever has, but he never loses his shepherding roots. And even in his adult life, it appears he goes back to the shepherding way of life, and he has much to teach us from his personal experience. It appears toward the end of his life, someplace in his mid-late 60s, he writes this short poem. And it has become, for those that are people of the Bible, and actually for some that aren't, one of the most significant poems in all of their lives. It's consistently read at funerals, though it wasn't meant for funerals. It's great for funerals. But it is no romantic prose. It's not meant to be like picturesque, and it's rather meant to paint a picture of what real life could be like and has been life for one person. This is how it starts, and we looked at part of this last week. It's written by David. It's a psalm of David. He starts it off this way: the Lord is my shepherd, and in that he answers 2 questions for himself that we all ask in our lives. One is, who's my shepherd? Like, who leads me? Who guides me? Who influences me? And to David, he says, it's the Lord. But if that's the case, he answers the second question, who's the Lord? And David was, well, he's like my shepherd. And those two together, he understands that he's, through the course of his life and his experience, that God, Yahweh, the great I am, is the shepherd of his life, guiding him through life. And then he finishes that first sentence with this audacious statement: I shall not be in want. I shall not be in want. Well, what does that mean? And is this like the only translation we find that in? This is the NIV. No, you find it in others. Here's one from the New Living Translation, which, by the way, this is a translation that takes the original Hebrew and Greek and paints pictures of ideas rather than direct translation of words. And it better captures the idea of what David is saying than the direct translation does. So he says, I have all that I need. The ESV, a well-respected Bible, says, I shall not want. So what's David saying with that? Is he saying this? I got to the end of my life. Look back over my life, and I'm in a good place. Retirement's all set up for me. I'm good to go with that. I've got family, I've got friends around me. Shoot, I'm the king of a nation. Not bad. And because I couldn't think of anything else that I would want, I wrote this, I have no needs. Is that what he's saying? You know, if you talk to a psychologist, they'll tell you one of the symptoms of clinical depression is the loss of desire. Is David toward the end of his life and he's sick on his deathbed? And is it there that he writes? Because he's discouraged and depressed, going, I have no desire left. No desire left for life. So I guess I have everything I want. Or is he just the really optimistic guy? Just rosy outlook at life, and everything's good, and he goes, sure, I got some problems, but as a whole, I'm pretty good. It's actually none of those things. It's even more audacious than to imagine that. This is what he says if you take the real Hebrew and you just translate it out. He says, I shall want, it's bad English till just a few years ago, and now it's really good English. I shall want not. That's actually what it means. I shall want not. And even that doesn't capture it, because we right away think about wants. And we translate it this way. I guess David didn't have any wants. Bet he did. Bet you and I do. I bet we will all our lives. So if it's not about wants, what does it mean? This is really, if you take the idea, this is where the New Living is a little better. It says, I have everything that I need, in spite of still having wants. I have everything that I need. I have no more needs left in my life. Okay. Can you imagine? Can you believe it's actually that it's possible to live a life without a sense of any needs? It's so foreign for us in our culture, in our lives, because nobody's more aware of our needs, never mind our wants, than we are. A need suggests that I'm aware of it. I wouldn't know it was a need if I wasn't aware of it, right? So what's the deal with this? This is where the first part of that sentence is the critical part of this sentence. What David is saying, I've reached a place in my life where I don't have needs because the Lord is my shepherd. If the Lord was not my shepherd, I could give you a list of needs that I have. But because I know that I am Yahweh Havah, the great I am, is my shepherd, and I know that he's good and he's great and he knows me by name and he loves me deeply, I guess the need-meeting deal is his, not mine. And so I'm not going to pursue those needs because I have the one who meets my needs. And if I don't have something, it's because he's decided I don't need it. Can you actually live like that? Well, it's easier actually, to tell you the truth, to live like that when you have most of your needs met, isn't it? It's easier to say that. But when you live in an extreme environment of disappointment, of things that just go wrong, of sickness and betrayal, and stuff just doesn't work out, and your retirement doesn't work the way you want, and college doesn't turn out the way you hope for, and the job feels like a dead end, and you end up with a boss that doesn't respect you, it's harder to say that and mean it and believe it. And David knew about extreme environments. He doesn't write this out of some utopian end-of-life deal. No, he looks back on his life and he can clearly see the extreme world that he lives in. 8, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, a group of us went to Kenya to dedicate a well that we had provided finances for. We arrived in Nairobi, and we went to the world's largest slum in the city of Nairobi. It's the Kibera slum. I've never seen life like that before. Never seen something like it. The abject poverty. It's a city into itself that has been fenced off so that you stay in this city and there's really no way out of it. But it's tens of thousands of people living in a place where open sewage is running down the street and there's no water supply really for them. And the crazy thing is it's built over a gas pipeline. And they have found ways to tap into a high pressure gas pipeline, and the entrepreneurs within that community sell gas out of it. Can you believe that? How do you tap into that? And it doesn't explode. Well, it does. Just a week after we were there, 25 people lost their lives because the pipeline blew up. Like, this is abject hopelessness. You ask them what their needs are, they'll give you a totally different answer than what we think our needs are. See, the context of living where we live has such a big effect on what we think we need. And to this, the Good Shepherd comes along, and David points to him and says, whether it's in Kibera slum in Nairobi, or whether it's in upper middle class Peoria, if the Lord is not your shepherd, you will always have wants, and you'll have needs that may just end up driving your life rather than the shepherd providing what he thinks is best. See, that's life in an extreme environment. This is David's extreme environment. It's the Negev desert. This is where he shepherded. Green pastures, lots of water, right? No, that's an extreme environment. But David knew something about this. He knew the sheep that he was shepherding, that they had been made to live, to survive at least, in extreme environments. He knew about the Awasi breed of sheep, which is the only indigenous breed of sheep in Israel, and this is the breed of sheep that he would have shepherded. God made them in such amazing, like a stunning way. God actually knows what he's doing in creation. There's the revelation, right? This particular breed of sheep, and it's really the only one like it, has the capacity to store extra nutrients in the fat in the back end of the rump of the sheep and in the tail. And during the really difficult months, the dry, hot months of summer, where they get about 3 inches of rain, we get about 10, 8 to 10 here, 3 get 3. They have 9 months where the average temperature is over 100. We can kind of relate to that, right? This particular sheep, God created in a way to withstand those extreme environments, and David knew that. It's really a marvelous sheep. This sheep has the ability to take sparse grassland, which desert plants often are really fibrous and hard to digest. During the hot months, God made it so that sheep's digestive system changes. It slows down so that it can take every bit of nutrient out of those hard to digest grasses. Brilliant, isn't it? They instinctually, in 100+ degree temperature, when they're grazing, will put their head under the belly of a sheep beside them. Why? Shade. That's brilliant, isn't it? Well, God made them to survive in those extreme environments. They have an incredible ability to keep themselves cool. God made it in such a way that their unique wool starts off as sparse roots that are spread across the body of the sheep, and then it becomes soft, full kind of wool on the outside. Why did God do that? Because it creates a thin air layer between the wool and the sheep, and it keeps the sheep cool. The roots are unique to this sheep of their wool. They have a hollow tube inside of them, which allows the cooling of the body through that tube. It's just brilliant, isn't it? And God made that sheep to survive in extreme environments, but David knows something because he's been the shepherd. Even if you're built to survive extreme environments, you'll die without a shepherd. You still will die. We're equipped for difficult environments, aren't we? We have all kinds of survival mechanisms. We will protect ourselves. We're clever. We are able to survive in some of the most difficult circumstances, but we still will not live without an awareness of needs, without a shepherd. David gets that. You look at it from his own experience. There's so many things in David's life that you think about that he goes through. There's the time where he, of course, defeats Goliath. He's invited into King Saul's court. And there he's given the role of a military commander, and he's sent out to some military missions and skirmishes, and he's incredibly successful. And he comes back to the city of Jerusalem and was part of what was typically part of when an army came back victorious. There's a parade that's happening, and Saul's looking at this as David comes back into the city. And he thinks to himself, I'm sure I am such a great talent scout. Like, I hired that guy. Look how great he is. I am awesome as a boss. Till they said this, Saul has killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands, and Saul goes crazy. He is so angry, he's so jealous, that David becomes his enemy for the rest of his life. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. Yeah, I wish the king was better to me. I wish the king saw my heart. I wish the king wasn't jealous. But he isn't. That's who he is. And the Lord is still my shepherd. And I have everything that I need. David, that day, goes into Saul's throne room, and there Saul sees him. And I think this is an HR violation, I'm pretty sure. He takes a spear and tries to throw it through David's heart. I don't think you can do that. I think you lawyer up if that happens, right? I think so. But not David. The Lord is my shepherd. Even in that, I have everything that I need. You see, you cannot say that if you don't know the shepherd and you don't know that the shepherd is good and great and loves you personally all the time, because so much happens in extreme environments where you look at it and go, he's forgotten me. He's not that good. He won't take care of me, so I'm going to take care of me. And then we can't say the Lord is my shepherd because I'm my shepherd. And I actually have all kinds of things that I need, and I'm afraid, and I'm anxious, and I'm nervous, and I'm worried. Not David. Unique guy. Is it possible? Is it possible to live a life without any needs, ever, anytime, from anyone, without fear, without angst? The measure of that is, do I know the shepherd, and is he good and great? And does he love me, and will he take care of me, regardless of what the circumstances look like? If it was just David, you would go, okay, what an awesome hero he is, right? But there are many others. One, for example, is a guy by the name of Paul. We've talked about him a lot. 1,000 years after David, Paul's this first century Jesus-following, church-planting missionary around the Roman Empire, and he goes and starts different churches. One of the churches that he starts is in the city of Philippi, a really respected, prominent city in the Roman Empire. And Paul sets it up, goes on to some other cities, and along the way he gets himself in trouble with the Roman government. And he's arrested. And thoughts are that when he writes this letter to the Philippians to thank them for their kindness, he's in a prison, likely in Rome, not for sure Rome, but probably in Rome. But the letter refers to the fact that he's on the edge of death. It's almost like he's on death row in this prison. And the way the prisons work there is different than now. The only way you survived in prison is if your friends brought you food or clean clothes or did those kinds of things for you. And so his friends in Philippi, the church that he started, they send him a gift to bless him and to help him out. And part of the letter he writes back to thank them for those gifts. This is what he writes them. He says, I'm not saying thank you to you for your kindness because I am in need. Hold on. I'm not in need. You're on death row, Paul. Like, go out of your cell and look at the warrant on the threshold. You're like, come on. You have needs. Now, apparently he doesn't think he does. For I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything that I need, even on death row. He goes on, I know what it is to be in need. I do. I'm not in denial. I know what it is to have plenty, been there too. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Can you imagine a life without any needs? Anytime, anywhere, from anyone. I've learned the secret of being content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And he finishes with this verse, which we take totally out of context and we isolate it. We use this when we want to encourage ourselves and others. We say, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. But you have to tie it to the first part. What's the all things that he can do? Well, we interpret it as I can be a hero, I can be successful, I can win in everything that I do because God gives me strength. It's not what it says. It says I can be content in all situations. And I can do them because the Lord is my shepherd. Jesus is my shepherd. And I don't have any needs because he's got that. I wonder how many times David, as he wondered, and maybe Paul, where they could reflect back on their life, David as a shepherd going, I remember all those times those sheep got in trouble and they were in need. They were desperately in need. They tried everything they could to find water, to find food, to get out of the crevice that they were in. And they were stuck. They had a need. And I was the need meter. And I went to them and I helped them up and I provided water for them. That's exactly what my shepherd does. This is what he does. We live in extreme times. Do we not? We are the generation that are going to be known, if we survive, of the generation that survived the global pandemic called COVID-19. Just like 100 years ago, there was a generation that survived the Black Plague. And that's what they went through. Those were extreme times. These are extreme times. This pandemic and related complications from it have taken the lives of 4.8 million global citizens. 688,000 of our own citizens. These are extreme times. The effect that it's had on economies, the effect that it's had on tension, just tension within our own country and community. Like when it first came down, we didn't know. We probably don't even know today exactly what we're dealing with, but we didn't know. And fear starts rising because the country is shut down and you can't travel and people are dying in large numbers and there's fear that comes about. And then we do things out of fear that damage relationships and we end up squabbling over little things like, should we wear a mask or should we not wear a mask? And because of fear and because of extreme conditions, that this is our response. And then a vaccine comes along, and is it trustworthy? Is it effective? Is it safe? And then anecdotal stories pop up, and news media takes it and runs with it, and politicians take advantage of the trouble, the extreme situation we're in, and then we polarize and we put each other in opposite places and we can't actually disagree without arguing and severing relationships. Those are symptoms of an extreme environment. And this world desperately needs people to step up and go, the Lord is my shepherd. He's my shepherd. I have everything that I need right today. I am not going to be among the fearful people. I'm not going to be among the hateful people. I'm not going to be among those people because the Lord's my shepherd. And I've learned to be content in situations that are just not content at all. It spills through our culture. It spills through every way. There are symptoms all over the place that either the Lord isn't our shepherd, or if he is, we're not sure he's good, and that he will actually care for us and give us what we need. In the simplest ways this happens. It happens in families, happens in workplaces. You know the tension that's there. The tension at school with, mandates, you have to be vaccinated and all these, it's just tension, extreme. This is how simple it gets sometimes, right? I pulled up to the four-way stop over here just this last week. I pull up just at the time a woman pulls up from the other way. I think I got there before she did. I really do. And so you stop, and what do? You wait for each other, right? And so I am a chivalrous gentleman. I wave for her to go. What does she do? Nothing. So I pull out, and what does she do? She pulls out. I stop, she stops. I'm still a gentleman. Go ahead, ma'am, go ahead. She does nothing. So I go. And what does she do? She goes, but I'm not stopping this time. I'm not. And she's angry with me. I tell right away that she's angry. Her hands are moving in ways that let you know she's angry, right? But I keep going, and I didn't mean to add fuel to her fire, but I waved and smiled. I thought that was a nice thing to do. She didn't think so at all. Now there are digits on her hands that are coming out in ways that I know what she's saying, right? So I get around the corner because I'm turning left. I wave. By now, her window's open, both arms out of the window, flailing and yelling, red-faced. Yeah. When I got home that night, I told Elfie, that is no way to do that. That is no way to respond to that. But this is us, right? This is us. The littlest ways are the indicators so often of who really is our shepherd. David and Paul, who both experienced extreme times, would come to the conclusion. David says, the Lord is my shepherd. Paul says, I found the secret to contentment. And then Jesus, the good shepherd, comes along, and early on in his ministry, he says this, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life. What? Don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink, or about your body or what you wear. Is not life more than food and body more than clothes? And then he uses the birds to describe how God takes care of us. Then he goes to flowers. He says, God does a pretty good job, doesn't he? And then he says this, do not worry, saying, what will we eat? Or what will we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans, that's people without a God awareness, run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. He knows what? That you need them. So he's not unaware of our need. And then he says, but here's how you meet that need. Seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness. What's that mean? What's his kingdom? It's the place where God gets his way. And when God gets his way, he's looking after us. When God gets his way, he's meeting our needs in ways we might not think he's meeting our needs, but he says, seek the kingdom of God first, and all these things, they get added some other way down the road. It all depends on, is the Lord my shepherd? Because if he is, the result is, I live without needs. Have I learned the secret of contentment? Are you living that kind of life? Is it possible for you? Do you believe it is? Because if you don't believe it is, don't try to make it happen. We're inundated with this all the time. These words come to us all the time. It is normal to be discontent. That's what our culture would tell us. Or if you're going to be content, you got to take care of that yourself. This is so antithetical to that kind of life. David comes to the conclusion at the end. I think it's possible. I think it's possible to live without needs because the Lord is my shepherd. Jesus, there's nobody that shepherds like you do. There's nobody that knows the needs of each one of our souls, first of all, and then our lives and our situation. And yes, we are in extreme places. And yet, your word that you spoke almost 2,000 years ago, that if we sought you and your kingdom, you would be the need meter on these other things. I don't know how you'll meet them. It doesn't mean that we'll be prosperous and healthy and live well to 120. It just means that this next moment, because you're so good and you're great and you love us by name, we simply can be content and live without needs. Might we be among those in our world that live into that reality. You're enough, Jesus. You're enough. And we worship you because that is a truthful thing of you. Amen.